What was the worst, most damaging way you took revenge? I was a chef for a famous all-inclusive hotel chain. One day I was approached in the kitchen and told I needed to pack my bags and move 3,000 miles away to fix a labor issue at another hotel. I happily obliged, but negotiated a deal where I would have my choice of any hotel location after I successfully fixed the labor issue. I arrived at the new hotel and proceeded to diligently address the labor problem, while also taking over dinner service for 750 people. After a few months the labor issue had been fixed and settled, and the kitchen was running as smoothly as I like. I asked my manager about when I could make the move to another hotel per hour arrangement, and I was told since I had done such a good job they were going to make me stay where I was for an indeterminate amount of time, i.e. forever. I let my management know this was unacceptable, and I demanded I be transferred in accordance with the original agreement that got me on a plan in the first place. I was told they would work on it. I gave them a 3-week window to address the issue, to give them time to discuss it with the head office, etc. I told them if they did not come through in 3 weeks I would walk off the job and never look back. After 3 quiet weeks I politely asked my manager if my transfer had come through or at least was still in the works. It was not. The next morning I gave the entire dinner staff the day off and told them not to answer any work calls. I set up the kitchen as if I were prepping dinner, onions and herbs in hotel pans full of water with foil covers, garlic sizzling in pans, etc. I kept the charade up until around 4:30 PM, at which time I left the kitchen, went to my room, picked up my bags and went to the lobby to wait for my ride. The manager came out freaked. There were 750 prepaid dinner reservations that night and no food, and told me if I walked out I would never work for the company again. I laughed, shook his hand and said goodbye. I never looked back and never talked to anyone there ever again. This was 20+ years ago. I've posted this story before but it's relevant. I got to dispense a little justice to my neighbor once. I met the neighbor sitting outside shining boots. He was in the Army National Guard. I walked over to introduce myself and we talked a bit about the army. I helped him shine his boots and pulled a couple of beers out of the cooler that I kept in the back of my truck. Fast forward a few months, and I'm silently wondering if I'm an alcoholic. The case of beer that I bought day before yesterday had dwindled to a 6-pack. I shrugged it off. I drove my wife's car to work one day that week. My wife worked in a shop across the street and phoned me to tell me that she's been watching the neighbor climb into my truck and stuff his pants with my beer. At first, I was going to confront him and demand restitution, but I decided that I could avenge my missing cans of beer by switching to bottles. So I switched, and when they were empty I refilled them with recycled beer and recapped. Put them in my cooler and waited patiently. A few went missing. I waited. Nothing else was taken. My point was made. Alright, Lloyd Christmas. A neighbor who I never met accused me of trying to stab her dog through a double fence this winter. They have a wooden 6-foot stockade fence surrounded by a 4-foot chain link fence. The dog was injured on something in their backyard and required several stitches, which resulted in a large vet bill that they couldn't afford. They concocted the story that their animal-hating neighbor did this and began a fundraiser and raised quite a sum of money, way more than the bill was. I had no idea about this whole drama until a friend in the police department told me of what this wacko was accusing me of. So once I found out, I requested a copy of the police report where the neighbor stated that the dog was hurt in their yard. There wasn't any blood or human footprints near the fence etc, and I posted it to the fundraising site. She lost friends and reputation for $400. Not exactly the worst revenge, but I think it's funny. My ex-mother-in-law was one of those a wife serves her husband and does everything kind of people. She always criticized me, my housework, the meals I cooked, etc. I decided to get even by filling a sock with the dust from my vacuum canister. Every day I'd stop by her house and take a moment to shake the sock around her house. It left dust everywhere. The floors were the easiest. Everyone's socks would get dirty from walking around. Her husband was noticing she wasn't doing her duty. The best was when I went and shook dust all over her couch pillows and returned that night. I made a show of flopping down on the couch from being so exhausted from work. Dust went everywhere. Her husband was like, "What the heck? Don't you ever vacuum?" Double quote. This is brilliant. I imagine you shaking and swinging your sock full of dust like a priest with a branch sprinkling holy water. Bless this carpet with vengeance. This is my dad's story from when he was a kid. He was walking down the road one day when a bunch of kids in their late teens pulled up in a car and sprayed him with a fire extinguisher. He blew it off as a joke and thought it was pretty funny. 5 minutes later the same kids circle around and spray him a second time. This time my dad took note of the license plate number, make and model of the car and proceeded to track it down and find out where the kid lived. That night he went to the kid's house and threw a fire extinguisher through the car's windshield. Justice was served. When I was 11 there was a guy in the year above me that used to be a bully. He would stand over everyone and he was massive for a 12-year-old. One day after doing physical education class, I went to get changed into uniform in the changing room that was backed onto his classroom. Just my luck this douche happens to be in there. What are the odds anyway? A few words are exchanged before he shoves me really hard into all these school bags that were stored in there and leaves. When I dusted myself off something caught my eye. It was his bag. His mum had written his name in big bold letters, so I thought frick him and had a look, and to my great joy discovered the sickest Dragon Ball Z card collection. He was a rich kid as well as a bully and had them at school to show off, so yeah, I stole them and never looked back. After school I seen him crying like a bee telling his mum that they are missing. You should have scattered the cards across the world and once he recollected them you'd grant him a wish. I screen capped photos from my wife's lover's Facebook and sent them to the school administration because he was a teacher and posting pics of your student's test then making fun of them is not cool at all. He was fired at the end of the year. That's genius. I love it when revenge is also pure justice. Sorry about the rest though, sad. Was at a huge music festival in Wales. Long story short, some muscle douchebag raver buttholes stole all our booze out of our tent and drank the stuff in plain sight while laughing at us all. We confronted them. They denied it. They were much bigger than us and were surrounded by their friends. So next day, they all leave to go to the main venue tents and my mate runs, dives into their tent and disappears for a good 10 minutes. I'm wondering what the heck he's doing, so I walk over and open up the tent, only to find him squatting over a hole he'd dug in the ground in the middle of their tent, and he's taking the biggest crap I've ever seen, just nonchalantly pooping in this hole. He finishes up, drags the canvas flooring back over this hole. We take a quick look for any booze we can have, but none that we could find, and we walk back to our tent. For the rest of the festival, we can hear these C shouting about the ripe smell of crap everywhere, until one of the lad's girlfriend decided to drag the canvas bottom out of the tent and finds the hidden treasure trove of crap. Suffice to say they had pee off more people than justice, so when they confronted us, all we could do was deny it completely and laugh. Surprised we didn't get beaten up simply for taking the pee out of the situation like we did. Was a good festival. Chase and status weren't bad. Found more booze. Used the porta potties from the Beach Break 2012. I was there, not one of the buttholes in question. When I was around 12 and my brother was like 13 or 14, we had a race to get to the shower. He only wanted to take one because I said I was going to take one. Naturally he beat me there. To take revenge I flushed the downstairs toilet. I don't know if anyone lived in that old of a house before, but our house was close to 100 years old. That mess with the water temperature, it was shooting out fiery hot boiling lava water. I kept flushing it. I flushed it every single time I could. He called me upstairs about 45 minutes later. He said the water was too hot and that he couldn't figure out what to do. He had shampoo in his eyes and he couldn't rinse it off. We turned off the shower and I took him outside to our backyard. I sprayed him down with the hose. The whole time him telling me what a good sister I was and how much he appreciated this. People we knew walked by our street, they thought it was hilarious. I wasn't going to tell him. I was going to save it and do it every single time he got to the shower. But my mom caught me the next time I did it and she told everyone. It's my one story. The only time I gave as good as I got. A woman rear-ended me pretty bad. Told me not to call the cops because she was on the way to a AA meeting and she would lose her license. She called her boyfriend, who was a lawyer, and he told me to let her go. Told me to come to his office and he would pay cash for all repairs if I brought in an estimate. Did as requested. Lawyer laughed at me and said there was no proof and I wouldn't get a cent. I was completely broke and knew I could not afford the repairs, and furthermore the car was not legally drivable as it was. Late on another night I went to the AA meeting via bicycle. She had said where it was in passing and I checked the schedule. I confronted her on her way out. She confessed her license was suspended and she had been driving without a license that day. Since it was summer I had days free from class and rode my bicycle to the lawyer's office for a few days to learn his schedule from across the street. Slowly a plan for revenge took shape in my mind. When I knew his beautiful car would be unattended for a while, I filled his gas tank with sand and sugar loads of it. At the time I lived in a bad neighborhood and there were always abandoned cars around. I had taken the rear plate off on one with expired tag and put that on his car. Next I slashed all 4 tires with a small slit so the air would slowly be gone by the time he was leaving. But now I was only able to see the first part of my plan from my perch. He came out from his office, saw the car sitting low to the ground and started screaming like a banshee. And this is how I imagined the rest. He pays to get the car towed. They patch the tires, he drives off. Engine fails eventually because of the sand etc. Tows it again, pays for repairs, or new rebuilt engine, drives off and is pulled over for expired plates. Since he arrogantly never took my information and never even looked at the repair estimate, he didn't know the name of his saboteur. I actually didn't tell anyone about this when it was going on. My girlfriend would not have approved, and very few since. But about a year later I drove by the office and saw it was no longer his. I feel like the woman probably would have done the right thing, but she was just mixed up with a jerk. Hopefully the events I started made it clear to her. Sweet secret revenge. I had this really bitchy neighbor a few years ago. She and her boyfriend always did random crap to me and my stuff. Once she drew on my car with Sharpie. It was a penis. Stole my garbage bins and hid them in her backyard. I've called the police on her many times, but she's got connections there so she was always let off. Then she killed my cat. He was an outdoors cat, and while he was chilling, she fed him rat poison. How do I know? She told me so. Apparently he was agitating her dogs so she killed him. Her dogs were fancy but top notch, 10k a piece dogs. They were all show dogs and freaking adorable. So I took all 3 of them and gave them to various friends' family members. One is in Canada, one in the UK, and another in Japan. I didn't think I'd get away with it, but she didn't have any of those tracking microchips in her dogs, so I literally just took off the collar and they were mine. I moved shortly after that, but apparently she's still looking for them. TLDR. Bitchy neighbor killed my cat, so I stole her dogs and scattered them across the world. Dang man, that's awesome. You didn't have to stoop to her level. No animal was harmed, and your pals got some dope pets. I used to have a feral cat living behind my apartment building. It would always pee and crap on my car. It hated people and didn't want to be touched, always running if you got to within 10 feet. Anyways, I got revenge on that bee one day when I trapped her, took her to the vet, got her a checkup and paid for some minor surgery. Then I got her adopted. Last I heard she lived with a toddler that picked her up and carried her everywhere. Frick that cat, she got what she deserved. Yeah, good life will teach that son of a bee. GRRRRR face. A buddy of mine insulted me, so I got him drunk, took him down to the family catacombs, chained him to a wall inside an alcove, and bricked up the front of the alcove. No regrets. Someone call the police. So everyone has heard of the classic X-Lax and the brownies trick, right? Well, my buddy pulled that weak sauce on me about a week ago, so I pulled this little ditty on him to show him just how much more worse it can get. So there is this awesome weight loss drug called Ali, which works by turning off the enzymes that digest ingested fats, so instead of being absorbed through the gut they are instead passed right through the GI tract. Well, I took said buddy out to a truce dinner at the local Asian buffet, pretty much fat covered fat in fat, and slipped him a dose mid-meal. The amount of raw sludge that has dripped, sloshed, and exploded out of that undeserving butthole is more revenge than I could ever hope for. Never trust the truce dinner. When I was first out on my own, I went to live temporarily with some friends while I settled in and got my own place. I put most of my belongings in the storage unit of their apartment. I went back a week or so after moving into my own place to get my things, and my buddy told me that the guys he knows downstairs from him had taken my bed set. I went down to confront them about it, and when they opened the door I could see straight into their apartment and into the bedroom, and there was my bed. They denied it and said their uncle gave it to them and shut the door in my face. I asked my buddy if he knew which car they owned, and he did. He pointed it out. I checked the doors. They were unlocked. I went into my car and grabbed the extra bottles of motor oil I had, and proceeded to coat the interior of their car in motor oil. The last bottle covered the driver's seat. Then I walked next door to the 7-Eleven, bought a carton of milk, and poured it into the vents of the car. Went paintballing. One dickhead thought it would be hilarious to shoot me in the back of the leg to see if it worked. Obviously it hurt like freaking crazy. Anyways, 2 rounds in and we get put on the same team. He's forgotten about it because he's done about 30 other dickhead things since then. He walks about 10 feet in front of me as we begin the round and says, "Is everyone ready?" So, I shot him in the back of the leg and said, "Yeah, just gotta see if my gun is working." He turns around screaming at me, so, ever so calmly I shoot him again. Judging by his reactions, I shot his left ball, walked away, he went home, victory. First job in retail, and I was really close with the rest of the team. Some newcomers were hired for the summer, which gave us some healthy competition. We were on commission. One girl kept stealing everyone else's sales, and when she was confronted she gave absolute no fricks and continued taking everyone's sales. Our schedule was always done on paper, and it is everyone's job to read their schedules properly for the following week. In the case you can't physically come into the store to write your schedule, you had to call and speak to a manager to read out your schedule over the phone. Anyways, she ends up calling and didn't ask for a manager to give her schedule. I gave her all the wrong shifts, which followed by termination due to job abandonment, missing work 3 shifts in a row. I worked in an office once, and the boss was a real prick. If you used any of your sick days, he would hold that against you at your yearly review. But if he was sick at all, or even just felt like it, he would stay home or go golfing. Well, there was a terrible flu going around. I was sick, a co-worker was sick and throwing up in his trash bin, but none of us were allowed to leave. So when my boss went home super early again, I went into his office and coughed and sneezed all over his mouse and keyboard. He got really sick a day later. In 6th grade, some kid made a snide remark in class about my name, and the whole class laughed. I saw him in the hallway carrying books the next day, so I kicked the back of his knee. The sound of teeth on linoleum still fills the spaces between my thoughts. When my grandparents were younger, they lived in flats, and the woman in the flat below them nearest to the post box would always read their letters. My granddad knew because he could tell that she was resealing the glue over her kettle. So one day he decided to send a letter to himself but include a black hair of my nan's. The woman having the same colored hair would pick it out thinking it was hers. However, with this he also included a note saying, "Stop reading our letters, you nosy CNT." My granddad's a rather blunt guy. Needless to say, their post was never opened again and he never received that letter back. I changed a battery for a guy I can't stand, so I didn't connect the auxiliary pack before I removed the battery from his car, so his clock and radio stations all got reset. I was playing follow the leader with my best friend in kindergarten. He was the leader and ran up the slide. We weren't supposed to run up the slide, but we were 5 years old and could make our own decisions. I followed him, but the teacher saw me and told me to sit down on the pavement until recess was over. So I told her that my friend went up it first and I just followed. The teacher called him over and asked if what I said was true, to which he said number, so then I told him we weren't friends until he said sorry. That showed him. He said sorry and then we played Tony Hawk on his N64 after school. Well, that was adorable. My little brother was a C. My parents got him a cat for his birthday. I could never have even dreamt of such a thing for myself. I made the cat love me more than it loved him. Do not frick with me. In Catholic grade school, we took notes for 1 hour every day in theology class, then were given an exam that covered the entire year. I deliberately waited until mid-May, then acted out in class so that I'd have a lunch detention. That basically means they leave you unattended in your classroom, doing some bull's assignment while everyone else is out at recess. During lunch detention, I stole the theology notebook from a kid's desk. I hated him, and threw it in the sewer on my way home. He had to borrow someone else's notebook and rewrite the entire year's worth of notes by hand. It took him over a week, working 3 to 4 hours per day. Not worst but funniest, I dated a guy for 3 years and broke up with him when I found out he was married. Whole other story. I basically did nothing when I found out other than stop speaking to him. About 6 months later I was thinking about it and wanted to send a little jab, so I logged into the student library site with his student card info and ordered a few dozen books on adultery to be delivered to his office. Option available to grad students, which he shares with 2 colleagues. He's a computer science major, so the books were definitely not part of his studies. It was little but gave me a laugh. Not me, but my brother has always been one of those evil geniuses thinking 10 steps ahead of everyone else. In kindergarten he went to a fancy private school and used to get picked on a lot for wearing glasses. The one time he actually fought back in self-defense, he got sent to the principal's office and lost recess privileges for a week. This was in January. He held on to that resentment all year. Fast forward to the last day of school. My brother consumes as many liquids as he possibly can, and then doesn't use the bathroom all day. In the last hour of the day, he sneaks into the principal's office and pees everywhere. We're talking all 4 walls, floor, and ceiling. Eventually, my brother gets caught. When the principal asked why he did it, he looks him straight in the eyes and says, "You pee me off, so I pee on you." And that's how you get expelled from private school. Wow, he must be insanely smart to pull that off in kindergarten. Amazing. I was sitting in the library on the first day of fall semester trying to work, and a kid wearing Beats headphones was loudly rapping to his music. I politely asked him to stop, to which he called me a bee or something, tried to make a scene, and got up and left. The thing was, he had forgotten to log off of his school's account, so I dropped him from all his classes. Well, at least he can tell everybody he's the man. He's the man. He is the man. Went on a bachelor weekend trip for a friend of mine with a bunch of guys from the wedding party. It wasn't anything crazy with strippers or W, but we did do some bar hopping. It was a Friday night and I had gotten up for work around 4 AM that morning and was pretty beat by about 1 AM. So I left the bar and went home a little earlier than everyone else. We had filled the bathtub with ice and beers and drank about half of what we purchased before heading to the bar. The reason I bring that up, I woke up completely covered in baby powder. It is completely caked in my eyes, nose, hair, ears and mouth. My nose is dried out and so is my mouth. We were all supposed to head out on a fishing trip that morning at around 6 AM. So, without batting an eye, mostly because I couldn't freaking open them, I head right for the shower, which is full of beer, water and cardboard cases. I quickly take a cold shower and get all the crap off and head to the boat. Only 4 out of the 8 made it on the trip. Everyone is shocked with how well I am taking having been seriously antiqued. But I simply ask a few questions and get the answers I need to hear and go about my day as if nothing happened. Turns out it was an old roommate of mine that did it to me. He was too fricked up to make it on the boat trip and is sleeping it off in the hotel room. So, the moment you've all been waiting for, the revenge. While we were heading into the dock after a day of fishing, I filled a water bottle full of all the bait juice and little pieces of squid and raw bait fish. I filled that crap to the brim. I was very quiet about it and didn't let anyone know what I was up to. We all made it back to the hotel and I acted like I was heading back to my room. Instead, I went over to this guy's car and proceeded to pour half the bottle down the AC vent underneath the windshield. But I wasn't done there. I went over to his room and knocked on the door. He opened it up and I calmly squirted half of what was left in his face. While he was squirming around and screaming, "What did you spray on me?" I sprayed his bag of clothes and then him one more time for good measure. Then I walked out of the door, So, the best part? He cleaned everything up and got over it. But he had no idea that his car had been filled with this juice and it was literally cooking in his AC vent for the next 2 days. When we went to drive home, a 1.5 hour drive back, he kept complaining to everyone that the smell just won't go away. For 2.5 hours in 90-degree weather he blasted his AC with fish juice directly into his face. He ended up selling the car a month later because he just couldn't get the smell out. TL. Doctor, don't frick with a garbage man. Man, that's rough. That's like crapping in someone's open mouth as they sleep because they drew a monobrow on you with magic marker while you were asleep. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.